give a hand for George and Simona Papadopoulos.
So Stan, wow, thank you so much, Lori and everyone. We love you too, and Pamela and everyone here at the Camarillo Republican Women's Federated Club. It's outstanding to be here. Simona and I, we're California transplants. We've been here for about a year. We live in Hollywood Hills, and coming out a little this way feels a lot more comfortable than where we are over there. So we were living in Chicago throughout this ordeal, where I was forced to actually stay, and Simona left a wonderful legal career in Europe behind to stay with a guy who essentially at the time was bankrupted by legal fees, had the FBI following him, his name destroyed all over every news channel, and it was because of her that you probably really heard my name. You heard some of the truth, and I'm the luckiest person in the world to actually have been married in the middle of this situation, so I would like for everybody to acknowledge her, because without her it wasn't possible.
I am the luckiest girl in the world to marry this guy. I married him in the middle of the storm where nobody believed in him anymore. But as this group of women that I'm honored to be hosted by tonight knows that women have a sixth sense. I always saw a great potential. I always saw a great man, even when he was on his knees. And today, my biggest achievement is to see George capable to speak loud with his own voice, while I was speaking when he didn't have a voice. And I did my best to take his story out, and I'm so proud of the strength he could show to the world, the loyalty he had to this country. Because it's not easy to survive under the pressure of the FBI, where they're doing anything in their power to convince him that it was in his best interest to lie, to take President Trump down. He was strong, he never said a lie. That's the irony of the destiny, right? He was truthful, and that's why the real truth is coming out, and that's why probably democracy in this country can shine again.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, Lori mentioned that the president, made an off-the-cuff, speech or no notes. That's my style too. So you're going to see me talk from the heart to everybody here, because just like all of you, I probably get bored after 5 minutes of watching somebody read off a piece of paper. So we're going to talk from the heart up here, and I want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers, because I really want to have this exchange with everyone here, and I know you have lots of questions and you want clarity, just like the majority of Americans want today. The best way I guess I could summarize the last 3 years for myself, her, and the country as a whole was it was the best of times and the worst of times. And that's one of my favorite quotes from Dickens. It was the best of times because, as Lori said, I was not even 30 yet, 28, and it's the summer of 2015. I'm at the Hudson Institute, great conservative think tank out there. I was working with personalities who were running the Pentagon under Bush and Reagan. Douglas Feith, he was a number 3 in the Pentagon under Bush W. Seth Cropsey, he was the Undersecretary of the Navy under Reagan and George H.W. Bush. These were my mentors. We were talking a bit about the indoctrination of students and, young people. And, I was one of them when I was 18, 19, growing up in Chicago, and I watched Barack Obama, and I had my professors telling me this is the new Jesus, basically. He's going to be the one that's going to save America. And I remember I was very interested in law at the time, and I was taking a class on FISA. I'll never forget it. It was called U.S. National Security and the Constitution. And the classes were about FISA and basically prosecuting terrorists at the time. This was during a little bit after 9/11, around 2005, 2006. And I wrote a pro-Bush paper on, dealing with terrorists and why I thought his positions were the right ones. And my professor made me retract my comments and threatened to fail me almost. It didn't just happen in university, it happened in high school. Same thing. So I understand when you were talking about the future and how scary it could be for young people in our schools today, starting from elementary school through university and graduate school, that how they're being indoctrinated and how we really do need alternative ways to educate our future. So the reason I bring up the Hudson Institute is because that's where I really was educated. These individuals that I mentioned, they were my real mentors. I spent 5 years there, my first 7 months as a non-paid intern, then I was a research associate, and I was in the heart of DC, working on these projects that dealt with oil discoveries offshore Israel, which is America's top ally in the Middle East and arguably around the world. If everybody remembers Israel's relationship with the Obama administration at this time, okay, we were giving $100 billion to the mullahs in Iran while we were trying to meddle in the Israeli elections because we didn't like Bibi Netanyahu. That was what was happening under the Obama administration. And all of a sudden, I'm working at a neoconservative think tank. We're pushing this new idea that Israel should not be isolated anymore. Israel should remain a stalwart ally of America, and it should remain anchored to the West. We promote a new idea. That's when, as Lori mentioned, the State Department starts to probe me a bit. From 2014, 2015, I joined the Ben Carson campaign. That's when things get even more bizarre. All of a sudden, you have intelligence figures from the American Embassy in London, Athens. What's Ben Carson all about? This is during the Obama administration. What are his key positions on Iran, on trade, on Europe, on Brexit, on all these issues that were very important questions at the time? So I noticed that there were eyes on me from as early as 2014, 15. And that's when I decided, after leaving Ben Carson's campaign, after he dropped out, which, by the way, was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my life. And I'd like to say a couple things about Ben Carson. Ben Carson, to me, in the summer of 2015, when I was looking to see what I was going to do politically after I left the Hudson Institute, was the one candidate, along with Donald Trump, which I felt represented the American people and the American ideal. I don't know if anybody is a Carson supporter in here, but he's a... This was a man who grew up in poverty in Detroit in the 70s, the 60s and the 70s. He had no father. His mother was illiterate, a very hardworking woman, but she was illiterate. And she instilled in this individual, meaning a young Ben Carson, the need for education. And he told us a story, I'll never forget this story, in campaign headquarters in Alexandria, where my mother would make me read a book a week and give her a book report at the end of it, and then she would want me to summarize it. But she didn't know how to read, so she was just doing it for her kid to make sure that he would progress and move up in this country. And what... And for me, education was very important growing up. And Simona is a trained lawyer. I studied to graduate school, and I feel that that is the way to move up in this country. I don't think the way the media today is trying to divide America among race and color and religious beliefs, I think that's all a disinformation campaign. The president is not a racist. Okay? So I just want to make that clear.
And I am an immigrant, but a legal immigrant. and that it should be. I'm going through a very long process to gain my legal status in this country, and I honor a president like Trump who respects his country and he ensures security, safety, and sovereignty. Sovereignty, sorry. This to show you I'm a real immigrant. So I think there is all a misinformation campaign. Everybody should look up to President Trump. I'm a European, and as a European, I always look up at United States as the biggest democracy in the world. Living here and marrying a patriot, I grown to love this country. And God bless America, as Lori said, for having President Trump as the President of the United States.
No, I mean, like I said, we're going to be bouncing around a lot. There's no scripted stuff here. So I'm going to bounce off what she just said. I remember when we were talking about banning certain countries during the campaign. We were discussing this with advisors, and on security grounds, and talking about immigration. The president has never, ever, candidate Trump, businessman Trump, President Trump, has never stated that he's against immigration. You could look up the facts. Lori, you talk about facts, everybody should look at facts, because the media has made it seem as if Donald Trump is against immigration, but it's the media's fault for trying to conflate illegal immigrants with immigrants like my wife.
And legal immigrants want this type of policies. Legal immigrants don't want illegal immigration taking place. They want unsafety. They want what we experience every day downtown LA. We don't want it.
No, I mean, we've gone through, we've been married over a year and a half now. You know, we're going through the process. It's not cheap, it's timely, but it's the right thing to do. I didn't want her to come in this country, even on my knees, and just stay illegally and act like a shady person that's, you know, undocumented and we don't know what she would be doing. But imagine what's going on in this country. We have over 35 million illegal people. It's not that they're illegal from X country. It's that they're illegal carte blanche. We don't know who these people are. When you're illegal, you're undocumented, and that's a security threat. So when the president talks about a wall, he's not talking about keeping good people out or bad people out or keeping certain people in. It's about protecting our country and abiding by the law. Without the law being upheld, we don't have a sovereign nation. And that's what the wall's about. So I'm going to go back to the spy stuff that is going to definitely be affecting the next, the 2020 election. I'm going to be, according to Lindsey Graham, numerous times where he told the FBI director to his face during his testimony that he's going to be bringing me in to testify openly. And there's a reason that the Republicans now, Lindsey Graham, great patriots like Mark Meadows, John Ratcliffe, who I've already testified, Jim Jordan, Lindsey Graham, Devin Nunes from our great state here. There's a reason that these individuals want to call in the Russia conspiracy guy, because it's a fallacy, ladies and gentlemen. There was never Russia collusion. In fact, when I had this dumb idea initially to introduce Donald Trump to Putin, when this whole thing got set in stone that resulted in this spying operation, the campaign said no. From April or May of 2016, the FBI knew this, Congress knew this, people like Adam Schiff knew it, but they wanted to continue this fake narrative when I couldn't talk for 2 years. When you would hear my name in the media, oh, the collusion guy, you would see me in black sunglasses and my suit, and they made me into a boogeyman. I would sit back with her in our little studio in Chicago, and I would say, what the heck is going on? I've never...
You look cute with your sunglasses.
How could I be the center of a Russia story when I've never even traveled to Russia?
My mic, no, okay.
So what happened is Donald Trump, I was a foreign policy advisor. He was talking about improving relations with Russia, which I agree with. I think most people don't want to have bad relations with Russia, okay? Russia is a nuclear armed threat. You don't want Russia to align with China as they are today, and that's the logic behind what the campaign was talking about regarding Russia. Where this interference came from, this hacking, all this insanity, I don't know anything about it. The campaign knew nothing about it, and this is an invention by the media and the intel community to basically help destroy Donald Trump's presidency. So I want to make that very clear. I meet this individual. Many people might know him. If you don't, he is at the center of the Russia conspiracy, Joseph Mifsud.
I knew Joseph Mifsud for many years before George because I used to work for the European Parliament, and Joseph Mifsud was somebody introducing himself as a professor, but close to the political circle of the Social Democrats in Europe. He was open about being a member of the Clinton Foundation. He campaigned for Hillary Clinton in Philadelphia in 2016. But once in a sudden, while I was sitting in the lawyer's office, we were dating at the time, and I go through his plea agreement, I see this Joseph Mifsud characterized as a Russian agent. And I said, excuse me, wait a minute, the same Joseph Mifsud I know for years, this guy's a socialist. What is his interest in the offering dirt on Hillary Clinton? He's a member of the Clinton Foundation. There is something off. This something off is the reason why the FBI came after me. Not because, as the liberal media were spreading around, they suspected I was a Russian agent. I can only say spasiba, and I'm not Russian at all. But because they knew that I knew a lot about this guy. That's why I became a witness to this country. Through the FBI, I testified to the Congress and to the Senate. But you won't see any transcript of my testimony because, of course, it's inconvenient for the narrative they're trying to fabricate. And these dates, my interviews dates of more than a year ago. So before George sentencing and before all this Russia delusions fantasy keeps running, and they alimentated by all sorts of incredible stuff. I gave name and surname of the people working with Mifsud. I mentioned organization like the Link Campus that happened to be verified as spy schools or center of intelligence, Western intelligence. Nevertheless, today, we still don't know where Mifsud is. Oddly enough, his role was to set up George and disappear. Nobody should know anything about Mifsud. But I started to date George while he was in the middle of this investigation. So I always say, of course, this is the love of my life, but God put me in his path.
It's true.
There is a reason why.
How many people in here watched Mueller testify? Just raise your hand. Mueller's testimony. I should say the Weissman, yeah, with the Mueller dossier and the Weissman investigation. How many people noticed whenever my name would come up, Mueller and the prosecutors behind him were terrified and actually would pay attention to what he was talking about? Do you know why that was happening, ladies and gentlemen? Because this individual who Simona just mentioned, Joseph Mifsud, who's at the epicenter of this scam, has turned out to be, according to congressional sources, somebody who was working actively with the CIA to target me and to target other people on the campaign to fabricate an involvement with Russia that never existed in the first place. So when Mueller was listening to these questions, when Devin Nunes was asking about $10,000 cash that I was getting, when he was talking about who was Joseph Mifsud really working for. Was it the Russians, Mr. Mueller, or was it the CIA? You're starting to now understand why John Brennan is in the hot seat. Because ladies and yeah. You see people like Rudy Giuliani, good, Trump allies go on TV and they start to speculate openly. I think this originates in Europe when he goes on Hannity. But the reality is they don't know what was happening. And I had to write the book I did, and I hope many people will get a chance to read it because it's a fast read, but it'll really clarify and help you understand the story from A to Z better than I can in a short amount of time that we have tonight. These people think that European allies helped set up Trump, and they just speculate, but that is what happened. And the reason that this is going to go down as one of the biggest scandals in American history, ladies and gentlemen, is because the U.S. government under Obama was colluding, but they were not colluding with the Russians. They were colluding with U.S. allies to set us up. And that's why you hear people like Sean Hannity, Lori mentioned it too, Australia, the UK, Italy, all of these operatives who were running into me, Paul Manafort, Flynn, all had ties to Western intelligence groups, the State Department, and no one was Russian. So the cloak is finally being pulled over everybody's eyes. Everybody's waking up. I hope my testimony next month does that and that people get educated like we all are in this room and that we really heal this dark chapter in American history and use this to help propel a Trump victory in 2020. Thank you. Do you have anything else to say?
Yes, there is something else I would like to add to conclude this night. I really hope that, and I think that Donald Trump will definitely win the election, but I hope that you can run for Congress and help him.
Thank you.
Because I think he would make an incredible candidate, an incredible politician, giving back to your country after all you have been through.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir. The question was, where is Joseph Mifsud now? So, after Mueller's report came out, my wife, Simona here, she's Italian. So she reads the Italian media, and she obviously can translate what's on the front pages of the major Italian newspapers. The day of the Mueller report, there was a front page story in Italy's largest newspaper that stated that Joseph Mifsud had been hiding in Rome for 2 years, living next to the U.S. Embassy. Now, the so-called Russian spy who was trying to collude with me has been under protection by the U.S. government for the last couple of years. So his last known residence is, you know it better than I do.
Via Cimarosa, number 6, is enjoying the Dolce Vita. Yes, it's on the Italian Journal, the address. It's nearby the American Embassy, by the way, in Villa Borghese.
Can I just say we're going to go ahead and do Q&A here, and what I want to do is relinquish one microphone. You guys can share one if you don't mind, and Pam will come around. You have to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. So, and we've already talked to George, and he will repeat the question. So, sorry to interrupt.
No issue.
Okay. I should have brought roller skates. Okay, legs, move.
Hello, and thank you for being here. Okay, a quick 2 questions. What is your relationship with Donald Trump, and what would you like your legacy to be?
Wow. So the 2 questions were, what is my current relationship with Donald Trump, and the second is my legacy. I'll start with the second. History is going to write whatever my legacy is going to be. It's probably going to write everybody's legacy one way or another, so I'll leave that for the historians. I just want the American people to know the truth, so that's what I think of my legacy.
Hello. Hi.
And the question about my relationship with President Trump. Well, we have a very interesting, we've had an interesting relationship for the last 2 years. Obviously, in the beginning, when he didn't understand what was happening, just like no one knew, he wanted to distance himself from me. There was a weird situation where Michael Caputo, who I think got fired after joining in the campaign for a month, started to call me a coffee boy. Never met the guy in my life. He was fired within a month of joining the campaign, so I always found it odd that he went on TV and was trying to distance Donald Trump from me. The president, obviously, recently, over the last, 7 months or so, has been tweeting me a lot. He'll quote me. He endorsed my book a couple months ago, so I think we're doing just fine now.
And we are in a women group today, so I think we both have the feeling to keep these voices up for the future, and that's why I'm going to join very soon Women for Trump.
Hello. I have a question. Why would our allies collude with our intelligence to take down candidate Trump and then President Trump? I don't understand it.
That's a great question. The question was, why would U.S. allies collude with our intel agencies to basically harm the campaign and Trump presidency? And I'm going to give you an inside perspective into what was going on with these U.S. allies at the time. Because for me, it was shocking too. When I would meet, let's go back to 2016. In 2016, the political landscape in Europe was completely different than it is today. Today, you have the rise of the right in Europe, for good reasons, and a populist wave, which has swept through Europe. You have Brexit, that's, I guess, still being negotiated 3 years later, and you could understand that their own establishment there is trying to curtail the will of the British people by trying to hurt Boris Johnson as much as possible to this day. So in 2016, I was living in London for the first couple months I joined the campaign, where I was still a director at this organization that Lori mentioned. And I'll never forget it. I was invited to talk to the Times of London, which is London's biggest newspaper. It's the equivalent of, let's say, the New York Times here. And it was about 4 months after David Cameron, then sitting UK Prime Minister, went public and said that Donald Trump is a moron, he's an idiot, his ideas are dangerous for the world, and that he should be basically stopped because this notion of a Muslim ban and some of these other ideas about having protectionist economic measures in place, of course, is against the globalist agenda. So David Cameron made these bizarre comments, and I was asked by the Times of London reporter, can't remember his name, over lunch, what do you think about those comments? And do you think that he should retract those comments? After, a 2-hour lunch about every other issue you can imagine. And I said, I think he should retract those comments. And I didn't expect the next day to find myself in the middle of my first media storm, because it was a front page story where it said that Trump advisor demands apology from sitting UK Prime Minister. So it almost cost me my job until Donald Trump himself intervened and Hope Hicks told me that he liked it, so we were okay. Jeff Sessions and Sam Clovis and some of these other guys were terrified, and but anyway, it all worked out. So the point I'm making is the establishment at the time was hostile to Trump's foreign policy and his economic policies. They wanted a more Eurocentric candidate like Hillary Clinton, who would support the EU, the integrity of the EU, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and all of these agendas. Donald Trump was against them, and that's why these countries decided that if Trump would win, their interests were at stake, and that's why they colluded.
Next person.
Hi, my name is Larry Duche. I'm a local attorney, retired naval officer.
Hi,
And
thank you for your service.
Thank you. I'm not the only one here. I know of at least two others. I have a question. I know you think about these kinds of things, but I'd like to know, would you be in favor of a constitutional amendment to make all federal judges retire on their 75th birthday?
The question was, would I support a constitutional amendment that requires federal judges to what after 70? Oh, retire after 70.
75.
Let's push it up to 75 and we got a deal. 85, all right.
Yes.
Were you ever afraid for your life during that time?
Oh, wow. We'll both talk about that because she lived it with me, and it was very scary. Quite honestly, I felt that if I didn't start talking or she didn't talk for me, then my life would have been in danger. The media can be your worst enemy or your best friend, and in this case, because there was so much misunderstanding and disinformation and confusion, and obviously the conservative media didn't want anything to do with me initially, we did have the opportunity to go, well, she did, to go on shows like George Stephanopoulos on ABC and MSNBC and some of these major network channels where, you know, slowly my story was coming out, and that was the first moment where I felt that I had a shield, and she was my shield, and, you know, I don't want to say that I felt I would have been killed because I'm not a conspiracy guy, but the things I'm exposing now are things that should have never been exposed or talked about, let alone me writing a book, talking to groups like this, testifying publicly to the Senate, and just waking up people. So I was scared, but, you know, she really helped me, and she probably has some input on this too.
I think he said it. Quite clearly, it was a scary situation. The first media that gave us a voice was ABC with Stephanopoulos. I still remember this interview. I did the two statements that have been twisted by the liberals. I said he's a patriot, and this cooperation with the FBI is going to make a big difference. Of course, I was right, but not in the sense they wished I was. He's taking down I'm not saying the FBI as an institution, but the corruption within the FBI. And he revealed something that is much bigger, probably, than what happened during Watergate. Because it's not the corruption of a few people, but it's a system undermining democracy. And that's probably what they misunderstood in the beginning. They let me talk. And let me say what a patriot my husband is. And it became the darling of the liberals. They kept calling me, come on MSNBC, come on NBC News, come on ABC. Then at some point, I remember I got a call with a producer from Fox News. And they said, can you take me on? Because they never get my story as it is. I want to say that this guy is the sacrificial lamb, the witch hunt, that I'm no Russian spy, and that received the death threats since I've been out with my European accent and blonde hair, and they decided I'm Russian. So all of you here. So today we laugh about it, but I think it doesn't matter how much they try to undermine my credibility, his credibility, the reality check is proving us right. And stay tuned and you will see, because it's something major happening. It's an honor to be part of this page of history, even if it has been painful.
Hi, I was just wondering, do you think that Bill Barr will be the man we need him to be where Jeff Sessions was not? I mean, do you think that this is going to go anywhere? I think we're all getting so impatient, and I guess just impatient to see some justice being done.
The question was, do I think that William Barr is the right man to basically handle the current situation? He's the Attorney General. Technically, you know, the president usually has an Attorney General who is at least friendly. Let's remember Holder and Obama, right? Okay, I don't think Barr and Trump are like that, but I think William Barr is trying to do the right thing. He's new, he's relatively new. Sessions, I think, recused himself because he probably had a lot of pressure because of this confusion about Russia. And, you know, he might have said something wrong, they might have compromised him, I don't know. Just dealing with Sessions throughout the campaign, he probably, my assumption is that he misspoke and somebody said, we have something on you, just shut up now. And that's why he just became a lame duck for the year he was in office. Barr, we're starting to see what's happening with McCabe. I predicted McCabe was going to be indicted about a month ago. It looks like he is going to be indicted. Whether he's convicted is another story. But it's not about the conviction, ladies and gentlemen. It's about accountability. And if you get indicted, you have, just like every other American, the right to go to trial and the presumption of innocence. And if he wins, so be it. But if he's indicted as he should be, as the Inspector General has recommended, then I think that's going to go a long way towards American justice and democracy. Because we can't live within a two-tiered justice system in this country, ladies and gentlemen.
So if I can ask, if you have questions, leave your hand up because I'm trying to track the room. But this gentleman's next.
Hi, first of all, Paige Hudson, local Camarillo guy here. So I read this book from Peter Schweitzer called Clinton Cash back. It was released in July of 2016, and it outlined, you know, really a long-standing history of you know, at the least abuse of power, and some would say treason by the Clinton family and the Clinton Foundation. And since then, President Trump has been calling for the prosecution of Hillary Clinton, and, you know, people, the Justice Department, to look into that. So I look at that, and then I think of the contrast here of something that a conspiracy theory that just took flight so quickly, and there was nothing there, and they moved so quickly on it. So on the one hand, I guess that my question is two parts. Could you maybe comment on why we still don't see any movement on the whole Clinton thing? Because to me, there's some obvious crimes there. And then secondly, does it seem to you that the speed at which this moved with you, with this whole, like, there had to be forces behind there on the inside that were pushing this thing through very quickly?
Great question.
Yeah. The first question was about whether Clinton is likely going to face justice of some nature, and the second was about why did things move so quickly with me. Was that correct? Like I said, we have a new Attorney General. The Attorney General decides who's prosecuted and who's not. We have already seen that they're pushing through with McCabe's likely indictment. This is something that the Attorney General could have declined. He could have declined prosecution. The Clinton situation is very strange because it's one thing for Hillary not to be touched, but it's another for people like the Podesta brothers, okay? To not be touched. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here that strikes directly at my case and Paul Manafort's case and Michael Flynn's case. Because maybe most people don't know in this room, but what I was being really spied on for were my ties to the energy business in Israel, and that, not the Russians, this was all a red herring. And this is going to come out. You're going to start hearing more about Israel moving forward. This is something that most people, not even in the media, know about. And Mueller's team, during my last session with them, after I was basically laughing at them, like, what am I even doing with these people? They have no case. They said, okay, if you don't plead guilty to this lying, we're going to charge you with a FARA violation, and we're going to charge you as some sort of Israeli agent, which I think I'd be the first person in history to ever even have that nonsensical charge, which I don't even know where it came from. So the reason I'm bringing up FARA is because they went after me with FARA for no reason. They went after Manafort for FARA and Michael Flynn for FARA, but Podesta brothers, who were actively involved in taking millions of dollars from Ukrainian oligarchs and were involved in the situation there, never were touched. So I wish I had an answer for you, because I'm probably as perplexed and confused as you are and everybody else in this room about why those individuals have yet to be charged or indicted or at least scrutinized for similar crimes that Trump associates were basically having the kitchen sink thrown at us for. So I don't know yet. The president, the last thing I'll say is the president has been very vocal. He does want to see prosecutions. And you know what? Now that Mueller has testified and the witch hunt has ended and the shoe is on the other foot, we might not just get to the bottom of the Russian story. We might actually see real indictments. And that's what Durham is doing, Horowitz. Don't forget, these are ongoing investigations. We haven't closed them yet. So we have 4 ongoing investigations, and I'm hoping at the end of them we will see some indictments on the other side, hopefully leading all the way to senior level Obama administration officials.
Okay, so as I walk over to the next, get the next question, I have a question for you. I read your book from beginning to end, okay? And my question would be for you, would you have done anything different?
Okay, well, hindsight's 20/20, so I'll use that right now. First of all, I would have never spoken to the FBI because, I thinking at the time I had just left the inauguration. I was just at a party there with Reince Priebus, and we were discussing my future in the administration. And the next day, I get back to Chicago, where I had my belongings, and I had an interview with the administration the same night I had the FBI come to my house. So, as you saw in the book, the FBI came to my house and wanted to discuss this Sergey Million, and then the whole conversation whirlwind into bizarre things if I was being cultivated and, crazy things that I'll let you read about in the book. So I would never talk to them because they were never looking for help. They were looking to basically set people up. It happened with me in a perjury trap. It happened with Flynn in a perjury trap. So they weren't looking for help. And I wish I could have helped them. When I went to speak to them, I wanted to help them, but we now know the Strzok, Lisa Page, Comey FBI was not after the truth. They were looking to manufacture these scenarios that would basically muscle us to hurt the president. Other than that, I probably would not have been so gung-ho about this Trump-Putin meeting that I thought for optics would have been a good idea, because, many candidates go on foreign policy trips. Ben Carson went on one. He went to Jordan and Israel, I think, when I was on his campaign. Trump obviously had a weakness in foreign policy, except he kept talking about Russia. So I said, okay, keep talking about Russia. I'm going to introduce you to Putin for a photo op, and you're going to show the New York Times that you can work with this guy if you become president. So, but that turned out to be a bad idea. So those would, so those would be my 2 regrets, but I wouldn't change anything else, and I'm very happy and proud to have been part of probably the most consequential election in American history.
The way I highly recommend that you read his book, because it's a real-time espionage. I mean, this has been incredible what this young man has gone through. Real quick, and then I'll take 2 more questions.
And make sure we get Lori in there.
From what you say about our allies, it seems to me it's a contest between the one world and nationalists. And
Yes.
all of the people, Hillary's people are all one world. You people are all nationalists, and that's the big problem.
Yes.
Was that the question? Was that your question? Okay, go ahead.
I agree, and what she was saying was whether these U.S. allies were part of the globalists and they wanted to basically collude to hurt the nationalists, if you want to call them that, the populist nationalists. I don't like to call it that. I like to just call it preserving American interests first, and that's why America First works. There's nothing dangerous about putting our country first, right?
Really quick, did you ever find out if the $10,000 was marked?
So Lori's talking about this $10,000, this famous $10,000 that I was given in a hotel room in Tel Aviv in the summer of 2017. You might have heard about this story through Dan Bongino or Hannity, or Maria Bartiromo was talking about it. It's been a pretty big story. And Devin Nunes asked Bob Mueller to his face about this $10,000. So this money was given to me under very suspicious circumstances. I gave it to my lawyers in Greece, where it currently is. It was at the time when I was being followed in Europe. This is the summer of 2017, before that savage arrest at the airport where I was vacationing with her. And I give this money to my lawyers. I go to Dulles Airport. I have 8 FBI agents rummaging through my luggage looking for money, which I did not have. So to make a long story short, I believe this was part of a sting operation, an entrapment operation. Congress believes it was as well. Certain elements of Congress that you'll probably start hearing about more publicly. And I have not had a chance to travel, but what I will say is that very important figure.
I have 2 questions. The first question is, you said you're going to testify in a month. Does that have something to do with the Israeli oil, or is it something else? And secondly,
Hello?
I heard rumors you might be running for an office.
Say it again, because his...
All right. You need that mic? Okay, that's all right.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen,
Check. Okay. Okay, ready.
Barbara, stand here.
Oh, okay. 1 second. Let me just, last point I was going to say.
Did it stop working again?
I can't hear you. Okay, what's your question?
Okay. First of all, I heard he's running for office somewhere, and
Yep.
I
Okay,
want to
quickly.
know where it is and what
Okay,
it is.
okay.
Secondly, he said he's going to testify in a month, and I wanted to know what the testimony was.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so she's got a 2-part question. The question is, there's been a rumor about you running for office, and then you're going to testify in a month and what that entails.
Okay.
can you repeat the question?
The question was, what am I testifying? Yeah, am I running for office? Yes or no? And if I'm going to, and what I'm going to be testifying about in front of the Senate next month. So I'll go to the second one first. we all know that there are 4 ongoing investigations into the origins of the Russia hoax and how it all started and who was involved, who wasn't involved, and what foreign governments were involved. I've shared with you which governments were involved, and those governments were U.S. allies, unfortunately. That's why this is such a problematic and sensitive issue, because the countries that we share and spilled blood with in Iraq and World War II and every war from 1920, they were the ones at the center of this scandal. So of course the president doesn't want to expose them and humiliate them, but he also knows that they have to be investigated because we can't ever allow this to happen again. So it's a very sensitive issue. So when you hear the president talk about Australia and the UK, this is what he's talking about. So what I'm testifying about is my experience dealing with the Australians, with the UK, with Italy, what they were asking me questions about, why they were targeting me, why they wanted Trump to fail, and find out more about Joseph Mifsud. I think by the time I testify, we're going to see the transcripts declassified between myself and some of these informants. So you probably watch on Fox. Stefan Halper, this Cambridge professor who was working with the British intelligence services. Joseph Mifsud, my understanding is, just as recently as yesterday, I was contacted by a congressional committee. They have more info on Mifsud. So something big is going to drop on these individuals, and then they want me to go and describe to the American people what really happened and who these people were, and to finally put to rest this story. And about me running, so my wife wants me to run. I want to run. We have had a wonderful group reach out to organize this, but at the same time, I'm still at the center of this very fast-moving, fluid story that I need to put a period on before I could really closure, before I could really give back and really use my past leadership experiences to pursue my present ambition. Because to run for something in the middle of testifying and every day and the president talking about a story, it's very hectic, but it is definitely in my goal, and I hope that this closure comes soon so that I can formally announce that and win and make California stay as red as possible.
Okay, I'm the president, so I get to ask the last question. Isn't that funny how that works? Will you go for a presidential pardon? And is there anything that we can do to help you with that?
Oh, it's a great question. It's a very kind question. A pardon rests exclusively within the executive of this country. The president can pardon anybody he wants, and he cannot pardon anybody he wants because he has that authority as the executive of this country. I think the president knows the story a little more than he did a year ago. I would never ask for a pardon because it's a, how do I say it? It's a privilege, not a right, to be pardoned. And my wife has a different perspective on it, and she could share that. She could be the voice if she wants, but put it this way, if I am pardoned, I would honorably accept it. If I'm not, I'm still planning on running for Congress. So.
I don't agree with George about that. I think he deserves a pardon. What he has been through is unfair. President Trump many times made a statement about unfairness in the justice process, and he already granted a few pardons. He's eligible for that, and I asked for that. You should ask too.
She was my voice, and now she'll be my voice on this. She's probably more convincing than me anyway.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to our fantastic
Thank
speakers,
you.
George and Simone Papadopoulos.
Thank you very much, everybody.